Good morning, everybody. Was messing around in the old news feed this morning, and I saw an article on one of my favorite games to play, Dead Space, and for what EA has done to Dead Space, they have forever earned my ire and my anger as a fan of Dead Space. But saw this morning. Visceral had some cool ideas for Dead Space 4, and was flipping around here. Let's see. When it comes to Dead Space, what dies doesn't stay dead for long. February 2013, EA has said nothing since to indicate it's ready to revive the science fiction horror series. We've already explored the Dead Space 3 the developers wanted to make. Now, the Dead Space 3 that they originally wanted to make was interesting in that it wanted to go more into the Isaac psychosis stuff. And that probably would have been a pretty cool horror gimmick, and they had included co-op in that to keep it horror, right, instead of doing the action garbage they ended up doing with it. I mean, I played Dead Space 3. It wasn't my favorite. 2 was my favorite. But EA had all these demands. Oh, we need to make it appeal to a broader audience. Basically just betraying the idea of what Dead Space was. And then, we need to work microtransactions in there somewhere. I mean, if there would have been loot boxes, then Dead Space 3 would have had loot boxes and loot boxes and loot boxes. I mean, it's just what it would have been. And that's ultimately EA ruined Dead Space. They took the thing that was going to make them a little bit of cash, and they, turned it out till it wasn't Dead Space anymore. And then after that, no more Dead Space for us. And they split, they put Visceral on Hardline and a Star Wars game that they didn't get to finish before, EA disbanded Visceral and sent them all, scattered them to the four winds. Visceral's dead. Early ideas for Dead Space 4 live on the minds of Ben Wannett, who was creative director at Dead Space, who's now the creative director at Crystal Dynamics. And apparently, this article is them talking to him about what he wanted to do with it. And basically what you see here is that, the apocalypse happens. The Brethren Moons devour most of humanity, like the Unitologists wanted. But the notion was that you were trying to survive day to day against infested ships, searching for a glimmer of life, scavenging supplies to keep your own little ship going, trying to find survivors, one unexplained. Alongside the rough plan for the story, there was also some solid ideas about what Dead Space 4 or about how Dead Space 4 would actually raise the bar regarding gameplay. We would have finessed, a lot of existing mechanics, one it said. The flotilla section of Dead Space 3 hinted at what non-linear gameplay could be, and I would have loved to go a lot deeper into that. The focus on scavenging abandoned ships would have also allowed for a more involved experience when fixing things rather than sticking your arm into panels and moving wires around, as in every Dead Space. That's, Isaac is a engineer, and that's how he fixed things, was sticking his arm into panels and moving wires. Visceral intended for Dead Space 4 to be a hybrid between a chapter format and a non-linear style the team wanted to go for. I figured you'd start in a section of space, maybe following a trail of ship carcasses to an orbital station you think might have the parts and fuel needed to get your ship shock capable. The Dead Space universe, shock point drive was a means of interstellar. Yes, it's basically warp speed. Anybody who is reading this knows Dead Space, and I'm sure they know what shocking is. If not, there was your little explanation. You'd start to form a picture of what happened in that region while fighting through scores of necromorphs from ship to ship as you learn new critical bit of plot info along with the means to shock to a couple of nearby sectors. One it continued, the further the player would get in the game, the broader the exploration options would be. The ship shooting counter was also a topic of interest for the team. Visceral did a fantastic job of making USG Ishimura a character itself. Yeah. When I saw when you had to go back there in 2, man, that was crazy. The ships you would visit where the game would get really diverse. The Ishimura had some inklings of that diversity with a very, I hate that word, diversity, with various themed decks, but imagine an entire roster, and they use it so liberally in the article, but imagine an entire roster of ship types, each with unique purpose, floor plan, gameplay. Our original prototypes for Dead Space 3 Flotilla had some pretty wild setups that I wish we had been able to use. In terms of guns, the game would have taken another look at the crafting system implemented in Dead Space 3, which in Wannet's opinion took away from the synergy that made the weapon special. I'll say. Let's see. That's basically just talking about what they would have did with the weapon system. Not to mention the new necromorphs the player would be using these weapons on, with Dead Space shifting from linear horror to a game which permits more exploration. The necromorphs would have been a greater threat in zero-G environments. The problem with all the ground-based enemies was that they couldn't follow you through zero-G, and that made them much less threatening. But make a zero-G enemy that can shake through zero-G corridors, propel itself in open space, and grapple with a player to tear off the mask and eat the face, then that's it. And they go on to say that could have been in the shoes of Isaac Carver earlier, an entire new character. With the apocalypse, there was always an opportunity for a clean break. It would be necessary for the story going forward to include any of them, or it wouldn't be necessary. He also said he'd have loved to do a game with Ellie at the helm, and had always imagined her as the protagonist of Dead Space 4. Well, I mean, not really a major problem with that. I didn't hate Ellie. Other than, started 3, she'd already ditched Isaac and went and got with a complete douchebag, but, I mean, that's life. These concepts weren't widespread outside of Visceral's small story team, which had come up with aforementioned ideas during their work on Dead Space 3. After the 3rd game, some folks stayed on to finish up the DLC, but the rest needed to move on to help with other projects. At this point, it was pretty clear that Dead Space 3 was going to be the last installment. No crap. Thank you, EA. Thank you so much for ruining Dead Space. Thank you for taking a giant dump on it and then handing it to us where we wouldn't buy it, and then you ruined it. Thank you. Now we will get no more. Despite critical acclaim and a passionate fan base, Dead Space simply wasn't bringing in enough money to be viable. Yeah. Visceral, like much of EA, was at the time converting over to Frostbite game engines, so it made more business sense to have the studio help out with Battlefield games, which historically had far better returns. Although Dead Space didn't bring in enough money, Wannett believes it could be profitable given a smaller budget. It would involve getting the development costs pushed way down. I think you have to focus more on the fantastic core experience, dread horror, and great dismemberment combat. You also have to forego some of the ridiculously expensive one-off action moments. Yeah. Visceral had a plan for how Dead Space 4 would end, although Wannett didn't want to spoil it just in case EA decides to continue with the franchise. I don't want to give away the lore, but I will say that we spent a bit of time working out the origin of the necromorphs and what purpose humans held in this dark universe. Would players find a way out of them? You hope the EA, which I know EA is not watching any of my little videos, but if you ever watch any of my little videos, EA, know that this whole situation with Dead Space is entirely your fault. You ruined it with your focus groups and your demands and well, this might make more money. It didn't work with Resident Evil, and it didn't work with Dead Space. it was never going to work with Dead Space. I just can't. Some of these companies can't look at what other people have done, see that it didn't work, and then knock it off. In a lot of ways, I feel like EA wanted to kill Dead Space. I really do. I feel like EA said, how can we kill it? Resident Evil's on the ropes. 6 pretty well killed Resident Evil for me. They looked at it, they were like, well, you know what? We could do this garbage, and that'll ruin it. But, it's just sad. There's so much potential. There was so much potential with those games. They spent so much money hyping them, only to murder them. But, I don't know. You got any opinions? Got any comments? Leave them down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Thanks.